everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Kicks Over Coffee. Again, this is an espresso edition where we're taking 1, 2, or 3 shots of espresso to get us through our day. This time, we are focused on the European market. Don't let the A in our name fool you. We cover all aspects of different markets all over the world, including the European market. Gary, before we get started, I'm drinking Portland's Pride, their own Stumptown cold brew, nitro cold brew. So I'm like all hopped up on caffeine for sure. Moving ahead, as we look at the import numbers from the European marketplace, where most of our brands sell into, what are some of the highlight, or maybe we call them low lights, that you're seeing as it relates to the import numbers?
Sure. In the latest month, we saw that the value and volume of footwear imported into the European Union had declined on a year-over-year basis at a double-digit rate. I think the latest month was June, and this marks about the 6th straight month we've seen these declines in European footwear imports. Because we've seen this streak of declines for a number of months, of course, it pegs year-to-date shipments lower versus the same period last year. Awfully strong evidence that we're likely to see full-year shipments retrench sharply, perhaps the lowest in the last 4 or 5 years or so.
And much like the American market, Gary, the European market relies heavily on imported footwear. They make maybe a little bit more collectively than the United States, but for all intents and purposes, they're a consuming nation of imports, or at least a group of nations. So these numbers are a broader barometer, much like they are with our import numbers, for what the general retail landscape looks like in the European market. Is that right?
Absolutely, it is. An interesting factoid, while we're still seeing that the volume and value of shipments are both lower in June and year to date, we're seeing that the volume is falling faster. What this implies is that we're seeing the average unit cost of footwear landed at the port in Europe has continued to rise. In fact, in June, it had risen to the highest on record and it increased year over year at the fastest pace in the last several years. So while we're seeing shipments lower, we're seeing the average landed cost continue to rise. And it is yet to be seen how European shoppers feel about seeing their footwear costs continue to rise, if those costs are indeed passed along to the store shelf.
And lastly, Gary, what's further to be seen is also what happens with COVID-19. Will we see a fall flare-up? We're already seeing headlines of what's expected in the UK. But each country is different. It's not a homogenous marketplace necessarily, because the nations are all handling this in a different way. So retail, we might see retail and import numbers ebb and flow in different rates as it relates to which countries are most impacted by any fall surge in the virus.
Absolutely. We might see something reminiscent of the divergence that we talk about that we've seen in the U.S. Certainly, we've seen that retail sales for footwear across Europe have been broadly lower. As you said, it varies by market, in one country to the other. But broadly speaking, we're seeing that total footwear demand in Europe is substantially lower year over year versus the same period in 2019.
Gary, thanks for those insights. And to our friends out there, please go to kicksovercoffee.com for further analysis on a variety of different topics. Also hit up FDRA.org. And if you're a member, make sure you're joining us for our 2 o'clock Eastern Tuesday membership call every single week, where we cover all these different issues ad nauseum. And so until next time, Gary, thanks for joining, and we will see you on the next Kicks Over Coffee.